Hello and welcome to another edition of Turned Out a Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham, and once again, I'm bringing you a conversation with someone who grew up listening to punk, may or may not still be involved with punk, but had their life changed by the genre in a major way. And today on the show, you may know him from Cold Sweat, you may know him from Artemis Pile, you may know him from Innumerable Forms, you may know him from Nasty, you may know him from Walls, you may know him from Red Rum, you may know him from Scabies, you may know him from Gehenna, but you probably know him from Iron Lung or Iron Lung Records. The legend, Jensen Ward, is on the podcast today, and this is a great one, a chance for me to catch up with someone I hadn't talked to in a very long time, but more on that in 1 second. First, if you want to get in touch with me, head over to the email address, turnedoutapunkpodcast@gmail.com. That's written by my brother and show producer and guest booker extraordinaire, Tristan Abraham, and he will get the message to me. You can also find me on Instagram, @LeftForDamian. There's a YouTube page, a Facebook page, a TikTok page, an Instagram page, all for this podcast, and all those can be found at Turned Out a Punk on those platforms. If you want to support this show, you can rate this thing on the platform that you're listening to it on, or tell all your friends about it and spread the word that way. I also play in a band. You can find out more information over at fuckedup.cc. We have a show coming up in a couple weeks at Pouza Fest in Montreal. Show's going to be awesome. Voivod's playing the festival too. There's wrestling. There's all sorts of fun stuff going on at that. More information can be found at fuckedup.cc on the internet. And that is that. All right, on to today's episode. As I said off the top, the legend Jensen Ward is here. Now, you are probably very much aware of Jensen Ward's work and various bands he has played in if you are at all involved in kind of the hardcore scene. But if you are not, Jensen is a center pole, I guess. That seems very weird to say. He is a foundational piece of the Pacific Northwest punk scene and formerly of the Reno, Nevada punk scene and hardcore scene. Has played in tons of bands, runs a fantastic label. They do a great fest too, him and John from Iron Lung Band, and there's also Iron Lung Records, and then there's What We Like Fest and all sorts of great stuff. They're this band that has been going on for, decades at this point. Like, I remember we first played with them in Fucked Up out in California on our very first West Coast tour. I think it might be one of their earlier kind of tours too. And they have consistently been one of the greatest bands making extreme music. And that continues with this brand new monster of an LP, Adapting and Crawling, or / Crawling. There's no and. Which is out now on Iron Lung Records. This thing is amazing. If you are a fan of, I'm going to say extreme music, but, hardcore, particularly fast kind of power violence-y, just to give you a sense of sort of the speed and the brutality that we're talking about here, they are the masters of it, and they have been the masters of it for a very long time. Pick up this record, pick up anything on Iron Lung Records. Like, there's a mark of quality on that label that few labels kind of carry. And see this band whenever you can, because they are amazing. Check out Gehenna, check out Scabies, Jensen's first band. Check it all out. This thing also had to be done over 2 sessions, so you hear kind of a change at a little point in the audio quality. That was because we had some internet issues, but we beat them, and my gosh, came back with a monster of an episode. I'm not going to ramble on anymore. Sit back, relax, and enjoy Jensen Ward on Turned Out a Punk. Jensen, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well,
I've always wanted to be on a podcast. I've never been on one before.
Really? This is your first podcast?
Okay, well, maybe I was on one about like 10 years ago or something. When it was the first podcast ever, but they didn't really know what they were doing yet. So I haven't really done it since, because most people just don't know what they're doing. You hear all these insufferable sounds of people thinking on a microphone, saying and like and so on. Boy, that sucks.
I try and cut that out as much as possible, so don't worry.
I appreciate that. Editing's wonderful, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, I feel like I would have reached out to you a long time ago, because I've been a fan from afar for a very long time, but also You're one of the first people I punished on a very early fucked up tour when Iron Lung and Fucked Up played at a skate park, and someone
Oh,
made the
in Southern
mistake.
California.
Yeah, and someone made the
Yeah.
mistake of telling me that you had been in Gehenna, which
Uh-huh.
led to me and my friend Matt Bickle, who was on tour with us, just fucking lay into you for Gehenna stories. So get ready for part two, man.
Fair enough. I'm ready. I lived some stories with them, so it'll be a good time.
Well, we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about tons more. But I got to start off the way they all start off, which is Jensen. How'd you get into punk? Do you remember the first time you ever came across it?
I do. As a child, I was living in an apartment complex with my biological mom, uh, and I was a skateboard kid because there's nothing else to do in Reno where I grew up. For anyone under 21 years old, there's zero things for kids, and the city has kind of set itself up that way uh, to be for adults with vice interests, and that's great for adults who have vice interests. But as a 6 or 8 year old kid, nothing for me. So anyway, I managed to get a skateboard somehow. I think it was like a Nash Executioner. I don't know if you remember those, but they were like these really ultra thick deck ones. And this is like 1984, I think.
Like
84, 86.
Veriflex kind of thing?
It was kind of like that, but the Nash Executioner was even a step down from a Veriflex
Okay.
because Veriflex was at least like a known name, and I think in the '70s, like pool guys would ride those, and it was like they were okay, you know. But the Nash ones were something that you could get at like Kmart or Gemco or one of those kind of big box shit stores. Um, and I remember it had a picture of like a scorpion thing on a pile of skulls, and I thought it was really cool. And so I would ride that around in the parking lot of my apartment complex, and there was a guy who I would see on the street who was like a leather jacket, punker. This is '86. Now I'm thinking at it. And he would like talk to me. He'd come up to be like, "Hey kid, what's your deal? Or what are you into?" And I'm like, I'm 8 years old. I don't fucking know what I'm into, so I'm like, I don't know. I like skateboarding and whatever music is in the skateboarding movies that I watch at when I go to the mall and watch the skate videos through the screen at the skate shop. Like because they used to have a TV in the window at the skate shop in the dirt mall. And so we would go and just sit there and watch whatever video was out at the time. Like it'd be some PAL video, probably.
Public domain or something.
Those first six Pal Peralta videos, like Public Domain and Search for Animal Chin and Future Primitive, like all those like first ones that they did were just mind blowing at the time because there was nothing like it. And my best exposure to it was I would go to the skate fair or to the skate fair to the state fair, and they would, I don't know why, but in Reno they would set up a half pipe at the state fair, like outside where they did like livestock shows and stuff. It was for being the biggest little city, it leaned hard on the little part for a long time.
Yeah.
And so they had like cow shows. I don't know, you go and like bid on a cow or maybe look and say, that's a nice fucking cow. Look at the hooters on that one or whatever. I don't know. But I never went to that part because I was like, those were where all the cowboys hung out. And I don't like those guys. They're not very nice. But anyway, someone had the bright idea to set up a skate ramp at the state fair as like part of the state fair. And I don't know if it was like skateboard companies being proactive about getting their what dudes out, showing them what people can do or whatever. But anyway, I was like obsessed with that. And so I would go and I would watch like Corey O'Brien was there. I remember one year, and like Pal Team was there, and so I would see all these like amazing pro skaters, and at such a young age, that really had a huge impact on me. Um, Regardless, I love skateboarding. I still do, always have, and skateboarding and punk have always been a very synonymous thing in my experience, and especially at that time because you think back to bands like Big Boys or something like that, like all of their imagery looked like skateboard graphics, and they were all obviously skaters. And like Tim Kerr still skates. I mean, that's amazing to me. But anyway, punk and skating always together. I'm skating in the parking lot of my apartment building. This guy comes up to me and is like, "What kind of music do you like?" And at the time, see, both of my parents, both of my biological parents played clarinet in like symphonies and orchestras and stuff. And my mom worked at a music store. And so like I was always around music, but not punk music. I was always around like band instrument music. And so I always heard it, but also, my mom was like not into anything cool at all. She was like into Civil War marches and like, you know, stuff like that. Like she played in a marching band in Virginia City. It was a town that's like really close to Reno. So I would go and watch all these parades. And I don't know if that's why I like drums so much, is because I used to watch the drummers always in those things, and still do weirdly. I don't know why.
So we have the Santa Claus parade here every year, and it's the most exciting part is the drum lines coming through and seeing all the
I mean,
percussion.
it doesn't get much better than watching a good drum corps,
Yeah.
really. It's fucking impressive to see what those guys can do, whether they're twirling sticks and being fancy or just playing the rudiments, like just bearing down on it like motherfuckers. I mean, that's the best thing to watch ever. I mean, it's cool to watch somebody toot a horn, but playing the drums, whew, goddamn.
It's way
Sorry.
cooler than a Paw Patrol float, I'll tell you that much at the Santa Claus parade.
You kidding, man? Danger Bay would be nowhere without those drummers.
That's true.
Uh, that's you and I letting people know that we have kids.
We are sucked into that
Good
terrible
Canada
world.
reference too, right?
It is
Paw
Canadian,
Patrol
right?
is Canadian, is it not?
Yeah, Spin Master Toys. And
Yeah.
it's funny because like years ago, probably the only thing that ever benefited my kids from their dad being in a band is someone that worked at Spin Master Toys took a liking to my band and hooked me up with a bunch of pre Paw Patrol, but like Yo Gabba Gabba toys for the kids. And I
Nice.
was like, oh my gosh, yes. But yeah, Paw Patrol is our plague on the earth. Gavin McGinnis, Jordan Peterson, and Paw Patrol.
Great. You got to do the cross-branded fucked up Gabba Gabba toy. I don't know what that would look like. There'd be like one of the kids would be like just smoke a ton of weed, and the
Yes.
other one would just be like, I don't know, just listen to this music video.
It's like a show that appealed to both my kids and I when they have Paul Williams and trippy imagery on it. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, this is right for me too. Perfect.
Um, and so I went off on a tangent a bit. Sorry.
No, no, no problem. You were talking
Mohawk
about
Man
drums.
asked me what kind of music I like, uh, and I didn't know what to answer with. I was like, I like, I guess, the drums in the Civil War band or whatever in the marching band, and I like whatever the sound is in these skate videos that I love. And I could tell him like, oh, there's this part where Ray Barbie is just like cruising on the street and he's just doing all these, no complies and like having the best fucking time of his life and like listening to all these cool jams while he's doing it. I was like, that seems like pretty good to me. And he's like, oh, I have these tapes. You should just take these tapes. And it was Subhumans, The Day the Country Died. It was Black Flag, My War, and Dead Kennedys. Ooh, which one Dead Kennedys was it? I want to say it was Gimme Convenience or Gimme Death, or no, it must have been Bedtime for Democracy because that was like the new one that came out that year. Um, and I just listened to him and I was like, what the fuck is this? This is perfect. Like this is the music that I love, and it sounds exactly like everything that all these skaters listen to. Like I can listen to this Black Flag tape and hear like the nihilism and the anger in my war and watch Bill Danforth like destroy a fucking curb, and that's like heaven to me. So really that was the start of it for me, is I got into punk that way. And of course, as soon as my mom found out that I was listening to this music, she was furious and like threw my skateboard away and took my tapes and smashed them all. And I mean, when you do something like that to a kid who's strong-willed, you're basically just like cementing their future. Because you hear these things and they change your mind, and that's it. And then if someone says no, like, "Hey, you stupid, you can't listen to that," you may as well just like, I don't know. I mean, give them $100 to put in a car and just give them the keys and say, "Here you go. So this is your life now."
Here's your fate.
So it's kind of been that way ever since. And I've always loved it and always tried to find whatever new sound would get me to that same mind state because it's just wonderful. And I don't know if it's like an endorphins thing or if it's just something about the sound that, gets in your brain. I don't know what it is, but it's amazing.
Yeah, it's weird because it is almost like certain like I listen to other types of music, but I find myself like the only music that really sets me off is punk, and it could be
Yeah.
like obviously hardcore, it could be like real minimal DIY stuff, but there's just something like and I hear it and I feel it immediately, like it just like you're saying, it's just like I don't know, it's like almost like pre-programmed somehow.
Yeah. Must be something in the DNA strain somewhere that just kind of that needs these sounds to operate at the correct wavelength. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a dumb kid with a skateboard who found drums. That's it. But yeah, I don't know. I do believe that it's something sort of inherent in the genes that makes people that steers people's tastes from a young age. Because they say that when babies are born, they already are who they are, and it's really just a series of like unlocking all of the. It's like finding the keys to all the doors that you need to open to to live your life the way that you want to live. I guess would be
Mm.
the way to put it. And I think that some people find those keys very early in their lives. Myself, I know for me, it was certainly that way. Having this dude give me the tips. I never even learned the dude's name.
You never
And I
saw him
asked
again?
around later on when I started going to shows and, at the skate shop or whatever, I would ask around, be like, hey, this guy with the purple mohawk and the thing. And everyone's just like, I don't think that's real. I think that you have some kind of like leprechaun, unicorn experience where you just saw some fake shit and you're making this up, dude. And I'm like, oh, really? Well, okay. Well, I got the tapes to prove it.
It's
And they're
funny.
like, oh yeah,
Well, it's almost like a type of kid that goes like super hard into punk, but they're
yeah,
not at all involved in it. Like I definitely
yeah,
remember meeting kids like that who had a bunch of tapes, dressed the part. Like one of the first guys that got me into punk was this guy that I knew in high school that was a couple years older than me. And I was like, oh, this guy's like the most down punk rocker ever. And then I start going to shows and realize, oh, this guy never went to a single show ever.
yeah. Well, it's
Do you
funny
know
that way.
do you know what your mom's aversion to it was?
Uh, she had a lot of issues.
Okay.
My family life early on is very complicated. Um, Compared to most folks, I find. I don't know if she had a weird upbringing or what, but she had a pretty conservative mindset, but at the same time was also really into like making her own granola.
Hmm.
So she was really religious and then also like community minded, I guess, but I don't know if but the community part was always super weird. And she worked retail at this store, so I think that she also when she was done working for the day, her having to be nice to people just stopped functioning. And she would get home and I would be there being a difficult child, which I definitely was. And she would get really frustrated with me. So pretty much anything that set her off, she would just overreact like crazy.
I I only ask because I hear from a bunch of people that have been on the show that have parents that were musicians, like, and I mean, like, professional musicians type things, like people that took it really
Yeah.
seriously, being very adverse to the punk rock thing, like just not liking it at all, and being, obviously much more extreme in your case, but being confrontational to it.
Yeah. I think because you have to go through so much discipline to become a professional musician, especially if you're playing in symphonies and orchestras and so on. You have to dedicate years and years and years of your life to just learning how to play everything right or be able to sight read fast enough to get the job to do that. And I mean, that takes an incredible amount of work, which I respect immensely. People who can do that, I mean, they're like 10 levels up from anything that I'll ever do, and it's amazing to see. And I think that punk at its core is like the antithesis of that. It's people who have no ability whatsoever and just have somehow get an instrument and just start banging away on it and making some noise. And it's probably like the most fucking irritating thing to someone who knows what they're doing to listen to that. And then probably even more irritating to them is that it succeeds. Like
Mhm.
it connects to some primal thing in people and they have a reaction to it. And music is supposed to make people react in a way. I mean, I don't know. You think about how like Beethoven would debut a thing and everybody would freak out saying it was so confrontational and so crazy. And it's like piano music. What's wrong with this? And they're like, it elicits these feelings in people and it brings out this like reaction or whatever. And this, people have this visceral reaction to it. But it's also maybe like contextual. At the time they didn't have guitars back then like that. So, I mean, everybody has this fantasy of like, oh, if I could go back in time, I'd invent rock and roll or whatever bullshit. Like I'd show them how to play punk in 1955. Everybody has these fucking conversations late at night, or in a tour van. But I do think that that's why professional musician parents probably get pissed off at punk because they're just like, it's not fair.
I think you're totally right too, because it's almost like this. It's completely antithetical to all other types of music, where it's about discipline and control and
Yeah,
pitch, and this is about expression over everything else, and anything else can kind of find its way in there eventually, or
yeah,
doesn't have to in some cases, and it's still, like you're saying, it can still connect with people because it's about emotion ultimately.
yeah.
How much of like a scene was in Reno when you started getting into shows? Like obviously 7 Seconds, and there's like a history of stuff, but like in the by the mid '80s into the late '80s, how much of a scene was left?
It's hard for me to say because I wasn't going to shows. Um, I would certainly see things around. I would see the seven, like the 7 seconds little seven symbol spray painted on the wall still here and there. There was this band called Division or Division.
Yes,
Um,
D dash Vision,
and
right?
yeah, and I used to see the Division thing like spray painted over by Hug High School on like the divider on the street. And so it was around. I mean, people were certainly there. And I used to go, there was a record store that was in the same mall as World of Toys, which was the skate shop, called Mirabelli's. And it was like a famous, well, not famous, I guess. Nobody knows about it. But for Reno, it was like the place to go. And it was like the place where 7 Seconds people worked. Um, and, so if you find like an old 7 Seconds record and it has a Mirabelli's price tag on it, like that's the fucking hometown copy right there. Like that's the one to get. It might be beat up, but because people in Reno love that band. God damn, they love that band. And anything that was an offshoot of that, they just devoured it. So there were always fans, and they all kind of still lived there at the time. I don't know that any of those guys even live in Reno anymore. I know Kevin Seconds has lived in Sacramento for decades at this point. Um, and one of the other guys that was in the first incarnation of it lives in the Bay Area now. Uh, all the people from the Rex have all kind of moved to different places. Uh, but I didn't know them at the time because they were adults and I was 8 or 10 years old. So, I mean, I wouldn't have a good gauge as far as like how much of the scene was still happening in like 86 to 88 or even 90. Um, but it did pick back up in the 90s when I really started like paying attention to shows.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess because like I forget who said it, but like when you become like a touring band, that's when you stop being a local band.
yeah,
And I guess by that point, 7 Seconds is by the like late '80s, they're huge. They're like one of the
yeah,
biggest bands in this sort of scene at that
yeah.
time. But I guess they would have been touring a lot by that point too.
I would assume so. I mean, I see a ton of flyers all over the place of them playing. This would be like 86 on, all over the country. So they were gone a lot.
And I think because their presence looms so large, I think that's why I always assumed that Reno had like a much bigger scene than I think it did at different points. Like you're saying, it did come back.
Yeah, Reno's a funny town. It's a very transient town because a lot of people will come to Reno to gamble. and then they lose all their money and like their house and their car and everything, and they just get stuck. So people stick around for as long as they need to get their lives back together, and then they just pick up and go. Or, they only had planned to come there for a little while for whatever reason. They finish what they're doing and then they leave. So that when they say it's the biggest little city, that's why. Because the little part of Reno is the people who live there and really like are a part of the city, either because they work for the casinos, or the casinos were everything back then. I mean, they ran everything and still kind of do. It's lessened a bit over the years, with Native American tribes being able to have their own casinos everywhere. So there's not as much of a drive for people to go to places like Reno or even Las Vegas. Um, but yeah,
It's an industry town,
fuck,
right?
I lost the point of what I was
No,
saying.
well, well, I guess you're saying it's like an industry town, kind of.
It is definitely, yeah.
Also, I know with Las Vegas at a certain point, I think it's in the mid '80s, the scene kind of gets decimated by ordinances that come in and stop shows from
Oh
being
yeah.
able to happen. Was that ever a factor in Reno? Like when you later on, I mean, when you start doing shows, like did you ever have to contend with the sort of city being adversarial to the stuff you guys were doing?
Absolutely. And like I said before, anything for anyone under 21 years old just doesn't exist. So you had to, when you do shows, like a lot of the good ones would happen like in a basement of a house, or, you rent out the odd VFW hall. It's a story as old as time at this point. People got to do what they got to do to make a show happen. But in Reno, the cops had cracked down on shows pretty hard for forever, from way back in those days. And I don't really have any like hard evidence of riot police like showing up to a Reno show or anything like that. And there were a fair few of like pretty big shows that happened in Reno because 7 Seconds was such a popular band nationally that a lot of bands would come through and play. Minor Threat played in like a backyard, in someone's backyard. I mean, can you imagine that?
I think I've seen
Also,
photos of that one.
yeah, it looks crazy. It looks like there's three people at the show and they're just like on the porch in the backyard. And like, I mean, if imagining you see the footage of Minor Threat playing in Another State of Mind, and there's like hundreds of people all singing because the PA broke, and it doesn't matter because everybody knows the words. And then there's this backyard show in Reno, Nevada, with like seven people, and all those seven people are probably super stoked. Do they even need a PA at that show? Probably not. But I mean, it was that sort of like guerrilla type stuff that had to happen for shows back then. But yeah, the cops for sure were ordered out to silence that shit right away.
So,
Uh,
what was your first show that you went to?
my very first punk show, or my very first show?
What was your first show, period?
First show period that I can remember that wasn't, and this is not including symphonies and stuff that I had to go to because I was I couldn't get a babysitter or whatever. But the first one that we went to that was like purely as a spectator was Chaka Khan and Al Jarreau
That's
when they were on
amazing.
tour together for the I Feel For You tour.
Yeah,
Uh, it was fantastic.
I
Um,
bet.
Chaka Khan was amazing live. Amazing. Uh, yeah, it was at a casino. I don't remember which casino it was at. It was probably, I don't actually, I really don't remember what casino it was at. I definitely remember going to the casino for that show. And you could get underage kids into those kind of shows. We bought a ticket or whatever. I don't even know how we went because we were poor as dirt when we were growing up. So like, there's no way that we bought tickets to go to that. It must have been some industry hookup with my mom, who they were just like, "You want some free tickets to go see Chaka Khan?" And she's like, "Sure, whatever. Like, at least I can stomach that, and it'll be something to do. You know, that'll keep me out of trouble for the night."
What was your first show that
So
you chose to go to then?
first show that I chose to go to, I think, was a Zoinks show in like 94, 93, 94, at my high school. So because I moved from Reno to a small town called Carson City, when I was in when I started junior high. I moved because I legally I had to. I was kicked out of my house, so I no longer lived with my mom at that point. And I lived in like an orphanage sort of children's home place for a few years. And so I had to move to Carson City for that. And in Carson City at my high school, some some senior or some junior in high school or whatever just decided to like set up a show in the theater of the school. And they were like part of the theater department or something, so they got the space. So they had this little like small theater for the drama club called the Black Box Theater, and it was at the high school. And so they had Zoinks and a band called the Narcissistic Freds.
I don't think I've heard of them. I
Both,
know Zoinks definitely.
yeah, they may have even done a split. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, Narcissistic Freds people went to Carson High, and they set up the show and had Zoinks come up and play. And there must have been one other band, but I don't remember at this point. I mean, that was 30 something years ago. But I remember going to the show and being like, dude, punk, this is cool. And I bought a record, two records. I bought two Zoinks 7 inches from John Cortland, in fact, because he was doing Satan's Pimp and put out the records. And so he had a little table at the show, and I had no idea who he was. I mean, I just went up to the table and was like, "Record, please," and he's like, $3, kid, you know. And so I got the records, and I was so excited for my real punk records finally. Uh, but that was the first one that I really was like, "Yeah, this is like underground, and this is like a real thing. Like it's not like the what I assume was 7 seconds playing in a basement across the street from the skate ramp at the state fair." That I swear to God was a real thing happening. Watching Corey O'Brien shred this hip ramp was incredible. He's killing it. And then I hear all this ruckus from across the street in this basement, right across Wells. And to this day, I'm positive that it was 7 seconds because it really sounded like it. Like going back and listening to what I remember hearing.
Yeah.
Of course, I didn't go over and check it out because I was way too young, and there's no way that my mom was going to let me off the leash to go across the street and check out some weird house party.
Yeah. Going to a stranger's house right now where loud music's coming out of.
Yeah, like I want to go to that thing, and my mom was just like, "Are you fucking kidding?" No.
Have you ever asked
Like,
Kevin
oh,
about that show or any of the guys from 7 Seconds?
I don't. I've never met him.
Oh man, I gotta ask him. We gotta ask him that about that show and get
All right,
confirmation on it. That'd be
call him
amazing.
up. Yeah.
I don't have his. I have his email address. Well, we'll write him after the show. I'll send him an email and
Okay,
ask him about this thing because
that
I
sounds
want to
great.
find out for you. Um,
I'd be curious to know too, because it's something that I've always wondered about, but never knew anyone to ask. So
well, it would make sense, right? Like I guess like if you're going to have a house show and you're right across from the state fair, it's like perfect
yeah,
timing and everything.
yeah, and it was a cool house too because it was like a big field around it, and so there was no other houses that would be near it to have like a noise complaint. So it was kind of a perfect house for shows or practice or whatever. So
That's
whatever they were doing in there sounded good.
that's awesome. You
Yeah.
mentioned Satan's Pimp there, and I guess Reno eventually becomes like in the '90s. Like I certainly remember reading about it all the time in Max from Rock and Roll and bands from Reno.
Yeah.
When did you kind of move back to Reno from Carson?
I moved back to Reno immediately after graduating high school. I think I lived at my mom's or my mom. At that point, I was in foster care. And so when you turn 18 in the States, I don't know if it's like this in Canada or not, but in the States, when you turn 18, like the second you turn 18, like you're done with the state. It's like, were you a ward of the state as a child? Well, now you're not. Go away and be an adult. Bye bye. And so all ties are severed. So I'm like, well, I got to figure out what I'm going to do now. So I just moved back to Reno, got an apartment with a friend of mine from school, across the street from UNR, and just had to kind of figure out my life right then. But so yeah, I moved back like right when I was 18. Uh, I started playing in bands a couple years before that when I was in high school. So I figured out how to play a guitar or something. Um, eh, yeah, I mean, I was already going to shows in Reno. Like the moment I got a car when I turned 16, I drove to Reno all the time to go see shows and to play shows a couple times, which was pretty fun. So yeah, I went back right away.
Was
No, I
Scabies
forgot the
going by
book
that
already.
point?
Scabies?
Yeah.
That's a deep dive.
Are you talking? Well, I want to talk. You guys did
No,
that antidote cover on the accidental double homicide 7 inch. That's
that's right.
fucking sick.
I forgot about that. uh, yeah, I mean, we must have. we must have been going at that point. I think that was probably like 96 or something when that came out.
I think that 7 inches like, yeah, 96, 97, right? 96 maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were going at that time. It's funny. The guitar player of that band she's like a professional belly dancer now and like travels the world doing that stuff. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
And the uh the guy who played bass in that band unfortunately passed away last year, a couple years ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, yeah, that was a tough one. He was a good friend of mine, and he had his struggles, but he was a good guy.
I'm so
Um,
sorry.
yeah, well, that's life. These things happen, and I love the dude, and I'll miss him. But yeah, Scabies was going at that time, and I think did we do another song? There was a Food Not Bombs compilation that came out that was all Reno bands.
Oh
It
yeah,
was
I
like a
remember that.
benefit. It was a
Yes.
benefit thing, and I think Scabies had a song on that, maybe, or because I had a band previous to that called the Jerks. That was like my first band, and we did a demo, but I have no idea where that demo is these days.
What was
And
the vibe of the
I mean, it's
Jerks?
like funny shit. It's like really stupid, you know. Uh, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing because I was singing and playing guitar, and it was like we had songs that were like, you know, pro meat, anti tofu. Like I mean, it was like I was 16 or whatever, and there was a song I think on there talking shit about one of my friends in class because it's like he got a flat tire and was late to something or whatever, and I was like, this fucking guy. It was real funny. That was a funny band too. The guy who played drums in that band ended up being a professional motocross guy and broke his back like 3 times or something
Holy.
doing jumps and shit. Uh but he had a sick house where we could practice in his garage, and like his older brother was like super jock dude, and like they would always come in. Him and his stupid friends would always come in and fuck with us, but they liked me because I could play that song, the AC/DC song from Razor's Edge.
Thunderstruck?
It's the one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Thunderstruck.
Thunderstruck. Yeah. So I would like play the riff, and I put one hand up and play like Angus style. Like they were just like, yeah, cool, dude. You're a funny kid, fat kid, right on. And I'm like, all right, well, just fuck off, you jerks. And so, yeah, he had a cool spot where we could like play, and that was kind of really what set off that all that stuff was like just having a spot where we could do it, which is great. But he also had a skate ramp at his house. So it worked in a lot of ways. It was wonderful.
So was this like a pop punk band kind of thing?
Not really. It was kind of more, because I since I grew up listening to hardcore, so it was more hardcore than most bands then. Uh, there were certainly a lot of pop punk around, and I was certainly influenced by that because I mean I went to go see those bands too. Go see 10 Foot Pole and Lagwagon and whoever. So that was part of it, but generally it was kind of more like meat and potatoes, kind of almost like Midwest punk kind of stuff. Even though at the time I didn't really know what that, like if somebody were to say like, "Oh, you guys sound like Midwest hardcore," and I'd be like, "I don't know what that is. I'm just trying to play these Black Flag riffs or something, but I can't play guitar like Greg Ginn can play guitar, so it's real like da, 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 stupid.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Well, because
It
I
was fun.
asked because before the Canadian American tariff beef, there was the Canadian American Gob beef between our
Oh
respective
yeah, dude.
gobs.
Battle of the Gobs.
Battle of the Gobs, which
Yeah,
I don't think the Canadian Gob ever answered the challenge from the Reno
they did
Gob.
not.
But I
They did
think
not.
the Canadian Gob wanted to play them in hockey, which was never answered by the Reno Gob.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't hear that part. I think
Yeah.
that John reached out to them a couple different times and was like, "We got to settle this. Who
Yeah.
gets the name?" And they were just like, "There's no contact," so he probably just stopped paying attention. But uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a funny one. And to this day, still, when people mention the Canadian Gob, I'm just like, "No, not that one. The fucking real one. The real Gob is from Reno." And funnily enough, dude, I listened to them yesterday.
The Canadian
The
Gob?
Reno Gob. Yeah. Yeah, I was listening to Kill Yourself Commandment because, like, I don't know, I came up in a shuffle or something. I was like, dude, yeah, fuck yeah, like That band, I played drums in that band for a hot second. Just at the very end of the band, like after Brandon either quit or was on too many drugs to be able to play shows anymore. They had like 4 or 5 shows left to play. And so John asked me to play the shows because at that point I'd already maybe established myself in Reno as someone who could play the drums like efficiently enough to get through a song.
Yeah.
And so I did actually get to play some of those songs with the band, and I was so stoked when he asked. I couldn't believe it. I was like, dude, this band, I'm gonna play in this band. That's and at the time that's like, I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
Oh, I love that band so much. And I think that beef was a huge turning point for me because I had been a young pop punk kid. And then watching this beef kind of, when I say unfold, like, there was maybe 3 or 4 letters in Max Rock and Roll in an interview over the course of this whole thing. But being like, maybe I like the American Gob more than the Canadian Gob. And it was
Yeah, baby.
a big, now I love them both in equal way. Same with the Subhumans. Like before I was very partisan to the Canadian Subhumans over the English Subhumans. But now
Makes sense.
I got room in my heart for both Gobs. I got room in my heart for both Subhumans.
Yeah. I'm with you on the Subhumans one. I can't say that I feel the same sort of open-heartedness to the Gob fight. I'm definitely pro Reno Gob.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's another band now called Gob. It's either Gob or the Gobs. I can't remember what, but I think there's an Australian band called Gob now. And I'm like, come on, dudes. There's 2 other bands called Gob. Stop it. And there's a band in Olympia right now called the Gobs.
Oh my God.
And
Gob
I
War.
told them, I was like, dude, this is a band, right? Gob? And they're like, what? Whatever.
Internet problems be damned. We are back now, headphones and all.
Bigger and better than ever.
Exactly.
I'm even using natural lighting today. I'm really getting the hang of this podcast thing now.
You look better than I do. You're even in front of a more professional punk rock documentary backdrop.
Right, of course, yeah. Sign me up for the talking head duties. Ian MacKay's old news.
Exactly. They're eventually going to have to move on to the next generation, right? Like,
well, when those old fuckers die out, then yeah, they're going to have to talk to somebody.
Who are they going to talk to with those guys not around to talk about this stuff? Anyway, let's.
You and me. Duh.
Yes.
We've been around the block a couple times, I know you've probably been to Fresno, to California.
I don't think I've ever been to Fresno.
Oh, dude. I have once.
Worth the trip?
Sure.
Yeah.
You enjoy life experiences as much as the next guy, I'm assuming.
100%. Well,
you got to do it at least one time.
We ended up talking about Gob yesterday, and both admitted we have a mutual love for Gob in Reno. Less for Gob in Canada, which it seems to be more one-sided on my part. But
that's delightful.
Gob is a Reno Gob. I mean, when I say this, is a fantastic band, and I think they seemed like at the time like a lot bigger than I think they're kind of remembered as now, or at least they don't seem to be as celebrated as some of the other bands from that era.
I agree with that statement. I think that they were doing things musically that weren't easily understood by a lot of people, because I know that their reference points were different than a lot of other punk bands. Like they were coming at it listening to like a lot of the 90s noise rock stuff like Dazzling Killman and Cherubs and that sort of thing. And I don't think a lot of people were using those influences to play punk music. Like, so they were just, and also, I mean, they were heavily sort of connected to that West Bay Doom Riders crew of, No Less and Agents of Satan and Dead Bodies Everywhere. I mean, it was the same drummer on the last batch of stuff. Was the Dead Bodies Everywhere drummer in Gob. And so there was a lot more of that sort of like power violence and grind sort of thing that those guys were doing, infused with the just total weirdo shit that John and Leah were coming up with. And I think it was such a cool, potent, interesting, an original sounding mix of things that made that band really what it was. Plus the artwork was incredible. So I really lucked out in that lottery, getting to play with John so much. over the years because, you know, we get to use that cool fucking art and his crazy ass ideas. So it's great. But yeah, they rule.
The Gob Spaz split was like an all time classic wantless record for me, and then finally getting a copy
Oh,
later
cool.
on. But then never realizing till recently that the Spaz side is all about the guy that does Punk Rock MBA, that popular YouTube channel.
Finn McKenty, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I never
It's
put it
super
together.
funny. Yeah, that's how I even knew who he was. I didn't know that he had a life beyond that record. And then I was poking around on YouTube or something, and something came up where he's like, "We're going to talk about corn," and I was like, "What the fuck is this? Who's this? This the guy from the Spaz record?" Okay. Uh, so I don't know. I was like, man, this world is way smaller than I thought it was. Uh,
Yes, yeah.
but yeah, that Finn yodeling in a bathtub title. I mean, Spaz, like, they had the best fucking song titles of all time. Jeez, that band was amazing.
They were like the
But yeah,
Beastie
actually,
Boys.
that
Oh, sorry, go on.
no, you go ahead. The
They were
Beastie Boys of what?
they were the Beastie Boys of like hardcore in terms of like their influence, aesthetic vibe, and everything about it. Like especially with like the kung fu movies and the
Yeah,
referencing hip hop stuff. They were like I don't know, just like too cool, beyond
they're the
cool.
best. Yeah, they're the best. And you know what? All three of those guys are like the fucking best people. They're great. But going back to that record, yeah, that record for me is a special one too because it was the first record that I was ever in the thanks list of, and I couldn't believe it when I read it. I was like, get out of town. My name is on a Spaz record and a Gob record at the same time. That's fucking crazy. And then, you know, it's just such a weird cool, and I love that it looks like the guitar string pack and like everything about it is like the best. So it's such a wonderful record.
Yeah, there was so much, and I guess like Slap Ham too, Satan's Pimp. Like there were like a lot of labels that were doing like really cool vibe, like aesthetics and
Yeah.
packaging, and now we're like living this world where every record's like a there's like some record store day gimmick version of this thing, but
Yeah.
this was like a lot more authentic feeling. Like this is like, oh, we just got to make like a cool record that yeah people could mistake for a guitar string pack or a 2 inch record with no music on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that the Satan's Pimp that whole catalog, you know, a lot of so many of the things that came out on that label just looked so cool. And I do owe a lot of that to John's sort of aesthetic of you know, what does he call it? He always referred to the like he drew a lot of pictures of people's hands and faces and stuff, and he always referred to them as these sausage finger drawings that you would do. Because you know, they're all like big and bulky fingers and like everything is very bold. And I love that. I love his style so much, and I think that it's fucking great that all of this stuff that kind of came out, especially those accidental homicide comps that he did, those were so cool because they all were all it was all him. You know, he was just like, I want this thing to look like this, and it's gonna have all my friends on it, and they all had the cool like uniform packaging, but they were slightly tweaked. Each one was a little bit different, and it was just such a cool idea. And I definitely took a lot of cues from that, wanting to do stuff with Iron Lung Records. And you know, seeing the way that he ran his thing, and I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of fucking sense to me. So I've modeled my own behavior from that. And luckily that he's there to back me up when I'm like, what about this? And he's like, yeah, that seems like a really good idea that you had. He's really the genius behind the whole thing, you know. It's not me.
Well, and that you make your like debut too on that accidental double homicide compilation, like
I
recorded like
believe
final
so.
debut, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's
It's
pre
either that. Yeah, maybe.
Red
I don't
Rum
know. I don't
and
remember.
then
It was like 1,000 years ago.
well, we're
Who
going to be
could
talking
remember that?
about. I need to talk about all this stuff. Who were the big bands when you started going to shows in
When I
Reno?
started going to shows, like really going to shows, it was really like heavy in the kind of Victory Records hardcore stuff. Because in Reno, there were some bands that definitely played into that scene, but what I appreciated most is that they weren't really part of that scene as much as you'd think they would be. Like I remember I would go to the record shop. There was a place called Insurrection in Reno that was off of Wells. It was just like the best kind of record shop you could hope for growing up. You know, like you go in there and they would have, you know, the SSD power compilation or whatever, and then they would have stuff on MCR would be in there. So they got the cool imports, but they also had like chokehold records, and you know, they had all the things at the time that should be in a punk record store. And it was focused on punk and hardcore especially. It was such a great shop and such a cool resource, and it was like always a treat to drive there and go. And they used to have shows in there too. Like I remember seeing two pop punk bands from Hawaii played in the shop called the Raymonds, and the other band was called the Pineapples, I believe. And so I saw those two bands in this record store, and I was just like, this place is the best. But I also saw Battalion of Saints there. Fucking crazy.
That's awesome.
So cool. And there was like 7 people at that Battalion show, and they fucking killed it. They were so good.
I wonder if Jonah Ray played in that pop punk band from Hawaii, or one of those bands, like the comedian.
I don't think he was in either of those bands, because I don't remember seeing anybody that was 9 feet tall.
Yeah, that's true. He'd stand out.
Yeah.
Because
Man, Jonah's the best.
Yeah, and I know
he's fucking great.
Well, and I shouldn't assume that. Yeah, you didn't know him, but because he did that West Coast tour, right, with one of his bands. But I guess you would have, as you say, he would have stuck out of memory.
Yeah, he's a tall one for sure.
Yeah,
Jonah's actually, he's really good friends with some people that I played in Society Nurse with. So I got to meet him, and he's a great dude. So,
great dude. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, name drops aside, we're both so friendly with famous people.
We know.
I think it's going to be a real treat for your listeners.
Yeah. People love this stuff. This is what this whole podcast is about, name dropping.
Oh, well, I got a whole bunch more. I'm just kidding.
Well, let's go.
I sang on Ray Parker Jr.'s microphone, so how about that?
Well, there we go. Well, we'll get into that, I'm sure, because, but before that, speaking of name drops, the MCR comps and the MCR distribution of those records, I think, for me, was so key to getting into like Japanese punk and hardcore.
Dude, the city comps, they were the best.
Good.
Yeah, they were the best. I mean, that shit opened my brain all the way up. And I was like, this is it. I need to listen to more bands called Chicken Shit. Yep.
Or like John Holmes, like another band that I fell in love with on one of those comps. There was like so many of those bands that like I heard one song from on those comps, and then like Blaze. Took me forever to find the Blaze 7-inch after hearing the Blaze song on one of the comps.
Yeah, dude, that record shreds. It's great.
And it's funny because like I guess it's sound pollution, right? Was their conduit to
in the US, I believe that's right. Yeah.
Because I feel like at the time, those records, like you're saying, like those were like the type of records that you could find easily enough. Like it's certainly a lot easier than HG Fact records or anything else, you know, a little bit more obscure than that even.
Yeah, that's certainly the case for me because I found them and in Reno, Nevada, of all places. So if they made it to Reno, then, you know, they're doing a good job, sound pollution.
So I guess that was there like you mentioned the Victory scene. Like who were some of the bands that were kind of coming out of that?
Yeah, I remember going to see. We used to have this Mexican restaurant that did shows for a little while called Casa Margaritas, and they would host all kinds of stuff coming through. And I remember seeing like Area 51 and Black Fork and Dead and Gone, Los Crudos. You know, bands like that, a lot of bands like that played there, but also like Squirt Gun and which I think maybe was that might've been the first show that I ever played in Reno, or was supposed to play, but didn't play. I don't know, that's a different story for a little bit later. But, the bands that came through a lot were like Snapcase and Donuts when they toured together. They played there. A lot of Victory stuff, but I kind of stayed away from those shows because they were really violent and kind of unwelcoming for someone like me. And I don't know, maybe the joke's on them too, because I've always been straight edge for my entire life. Not because I have like an ideology behind it, but just because I've just never been interested in drugs or alcohol or anything. And so, you know, I would go to these shows and be like, oh, they're straight edge and I'm straight edge. I think that we're the same, probably, right? I like punk and they like punk. We probably all like Minor Threat, right? So I'm gonna go, and I was young, so I would go and I'd have like maybe some Crudos patch on my shirt, or and then and it'd be like, I like the Cro-Mags too, and they're just like, we're gonna kill you, and I was like, wait, well, hold on, what now? What's happening now? And they're like, you don't belong here or whatever, and I'm like, hmm. That doesn't make any sense to me. Well, fuck your shows then. I'm not going to them anymore. And then there was always like tons of fights and violence, and don't get me wrong, I love watching people fight, but I don't really like being in fights anymore. Because I used to fight a lot when I was a kid. Uh, Tons of fist fights, uh, just being out on the street, getting punched in the face fucking sucks. All right.
Sucks.
It's not fun. It doesn't feel good. It'd be one thing if I was like in a boxing ring or something, like I could at least accept that. But if I'm just going to watch somebody try and play guitar, or, some band that maybe is singing some songs about some shit that I like, and then some dude just comes up and wants to sock me in the face for it, and it's like, well, eat shit, man. I'm not going to this. But then weirdly enough, because of that violence, there was also this other set of bands in Reno that were fucking awesome and were fully accepting of people like me. Like I would go see Fall Silent play, and Fall Silent was in this crew of other bands that included Gehenna and Enowetok. Um, like just all like heavy hardcore bands. The bands would go on tour with Integrity or Ringworm or whatever, and all these things that I was like, man, these bands are pretty cool. And then these guys were just like, yeah, come hang out with us, man. Fuck those guys. And so then I learned that there was a divide between these hardcore scenes. And it was kind of an eye opener, because in my head, I'm like, we all like the same stuff. We should be friends. Some hippie shit. I don't know. Maybe it's from the granola that I ate when I was growing up, but homemade. And but yeah, what were the other bands? There was Bloodlet came through a bunch, and
It, it's interesting how you brought up, like, there's almost like it became like a parallel scene so
yeah,
quickly, like the
yeah,
victory thing, and sort of like, I guess, like the what you could kind of label almost like the pro core
yeah,
kind of thing, which synced up really nicely with the Warped Tour kind of fication of, I guess, pop punk around the same time.
yeah,
But then there was always, like, yeah, this sort of parallel DIY punk scene that sometimes it had an adversarial relationship to this other scene. Sometimes they had like weird crossovers, like you're saying, like Integrity and Gehenna would, or Bloodlet, like people from Chokehold putting out the Bloodlet record and things like that. So there were these sort of like, because everyone comes, like you're saying, from the same place ultimately. Like we're all into punk on some level, but it feels like, yeah, it stopped being. It fell out of sync with punk around that time, and it became like, oh, this is like the hardcore scene, and then it had
yeah,
very little to do with the punk scene.
yeah. Yeah, it's real strange how that worked out. And then, those two scenes would fight each other. So again, it was just like, God, these fucking fights, they're all the time. Uh, but it made it easy to like going to pop punk shows, certainly, because everybody there was just like excited, and they're just like, let's go skate and have fun and do positive shit. And I think maybe in my life at the time, I needed that, I was like, I need this. There's enough negativity going on around me at all other times that it sort of acted as an escape a little bit. And now I'm not saying that pop punk is the save all of music genres. It's fine at the time, but I did get a little tired of it.
Well, that's what it brings up, an interesting thing I wanted to talk to you about, because there's almost like you look at like 702 Records, and there are definitely like hardcore bands, but there's also like Scared of Shaka, or you brought up Era 51. What's like the pre-Era 51 band called again? Tungsten Gat? Tungsten,
Tungsten Gat.
Tungsten Gat, that's it.
Are those related? I didn't even know that they were. I know
Yes.
that Area 51 and Death Wish Kids were same crew, but I didn't know before that. I didn't know.
And then it becomes Murder City Devils, and I think someone from Murder City Devils was in Tungsten Gat. Maybe that's where like the two bands came together for the Murder City Devils, and I think there's a
News to
Modest
me.
Mouse connection too.
I
Also,
wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, that I never really got into indie stuff like that. I did love the Murder City Devils. They were fantastic well, especially when they first came around. 'Cause I remember, yeah, after the Death Wish Kids sort of wrapped up their very brief tenure as a band, everyone was like, "Hey, they have this new band, and it's like this swaggery rock and roll band." And I was like, "Hmm, okay, I'll check it out." So we'll go, and they had the fucking organ, and it was great. It was really, really good, and I was hooked into that pretty good.
it was kind of like their Rocket from the Crypt from their Jehu kind of band
Yeah,
vibe type thing.
yeah,
But I love those records too. Even the like the ones into the Sub Pop kind of years, I'm a huge fan of.
sure. Yeah, they were a great band. I mean, when they were really touring a lot and doing their thing, and the drummer of the band, Cody, um, he was in some other bands up here in Seattle that were also fantastic. Like, he's in Big Business and and stuff like that. But when Murder City would play, they would do this thing where he would light the cymbals on fire. Like there was this big buildup in the middle of one of the songs, and everybody's like kind of doing their thing, and then he would pour lighter fluid all over the cymbals and light them. And then when everybody comes back in, he'd hit the cymbals, and then like this big fireball would erupt. And obviously, they could only do that in venues that had very tall ceilings, but I definitely did see them do that in a place that they shouldn't have done that. And it
Yeah,
was exciting as shit. You know what I mean? It was like, fuck yeah, these guys are still dangerous a little bit. That's cool.
I remember seeing Nashville Pussy at a place in Toronto, and she was so tall, and the stage was high, and the ceiling was low. So when she's blowing that fire, there were singe
Yeah,
marks all across the ceiling
yeah.
afterwards. But something
I mean,
about
all that
pyro.
was real fun until the Great White Days, and then
Yeah,
it was, hey, let's pump the brakes on this fireball shit.
no more pyro at shows, I think,
Yeah,
after that, especially
yeah,
DIY smaller venue shows. I think that would definitely be,
yeah. I know. And then those places in Oakland burned down. All those people died. It was terrible.
yeah. And there was a tragedy show here. Speaking of poor choice of words, poor choice of bands going to next, tragedy. But there was a tragedy show here where They Live was playing, and
Yeah.
it was when they had the two singer lineup,
Uh-huh.
and the second singer was blowing fire and dropped the fire stick. His face caught on fire, and it got
Oh,
nuts. Like it was a very,
wow.
yeah, like one of those things where you like look back on it, you're like, maybe I'm glad my kids aren't involved in going to some of these spaces like right now. Like I'm glad my kids are. I want to just sit at home and have no interest in my world or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, you do want your children to be safe, but also you got to go experience that stuff, man. I mean, if
True.
you sit at home and stay away from the danger at all times, then you're going to have a pretty boring life.
I'm very much now becoming like the helicopter parent that I'm sure my kids hate. Like where I'm like, okay, call me before you get there. Make sure you're checking in. And like I would, but I guess we had payphones right then, so there was no obligation to check in, right?
True.
So
And Destroy did that thing on their record where they put the quarter sound for the payphone. Do you
yeah,
remember this?
yeah, for the
They at
dialers.
the end of their record, yeah, they put the dialer sound in there, so you could just like, because I remember recording that onto a tape and just bringing my Walkman and go and make free long distance calls all the time. So I thank you, Destroy. That was very helpful.
I don't think that worked in Canada because we only had like one
Oh yeah.
telephone company back then. But I remember
Okay.
going to the States I was roadieing for the Swarm on on a tour and getting given phone dialers and
Oh,
being like, oh my
that was the
gosh.
best. Yeah. That was like the best hack that they came up with back then. It was wonderful.
And Kinko's hacks too. Like it felt like back then, like there was just so much punk stuff that was like, like, and I guess it leads into something I wanted to talk to you about, which is that whole kind of crime think era and Inside Out fanzine. Because you guys, were you in Gehenna when you the tour with Catharsis?
Oh yeah.
What was that tour?
Well, the European one, right? Is what
Okay,
you're talking about?
yeah, the European. I thought there was an American thing too, but maybe I'm just thinking of
There
the split record.
there was an American thing, and there were a couple shows, and it started. This was in '97, I believe. Uh, they played a few shows, including the Reno show. Um, I wasn't in the band for the American shows. I was already practicing with them, getting ready, because the guy who was playing drums in the band at the time was really young. He was like 16 or 17. And Gehenna was asked to go to Europe in October, which is during the school year. So Josh couldn't go to Europe, so they asked me to play drums. So I was already learning everything and like jamming with these guys. And then they did a couple of shows in the U.S. with Catharsis in preparation for that tour. And then there was a big fight at the Reno show because, as I mentioned before, you know, these two factions of hardcore in Reno were at war essentially. You know, and so there's a lot of violence between that. And I was on the side of Gehenna and Unra and you know, all those bands. And then there was this other crew of bands that were sort of allied with, what was it? What was the name of there was some crew out of like Salt Lake City that had ties to somebody in Dayton, Ohio. And it went like all these weird places. Courage Crew, I think it was called.
Crew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will Smith became part of it later on.
The actor?
The actor. He was producing a TV series with the producers of the TV show Entourage about the Courage Crew, and apparently there's a photo and
What?
yeah.
Oh,
I wish I was making this up, but I'm not.
Oh wow, very weird.
That Oscar situation is a lot more explainable when you know about his connection with these crews.
So the Courage Crew, like Revolutionary Power Tools beef, extends all the way to Will Smith and the Oscars now. I love it.
I think
connection.
I think
that's like a Nardwuar level connection right there.
I think Revolutionary Power Tools crew needs to think about maybe putting Chris Rock in as a member.
True. I'd love that idea. I'll talk to him. I mean, I'll ring up Cheese in a minute and we'll see what's up. But yeah, anyway, so there was a big fight and a bunch of people went to the hospital. I know one fella got stabbed and it was a whole to do. So Gehenna we didn't do anything in the US after that show, you know, before Europe, in fear that we wouldn't be able to do the European tour, because I think at the time all five of us were convinced that this would be the only chance that any of us would ever have to go to Europe. And so I was like, let's not fuck this up. And they're just like, yeah, let's not fuck this up. We'll just lay low for a little bit, wait for the dust to clear, and then we'll go to Europe, which is what happened. And then we did the European trip with Catharsis, and that was fun, but there was a lot of activity on that tour, let's say, that probably shouldn't happen on a regular tour. We were inexperienced in the ways of touring in Europe, which is much different than touring in the United States. And again, this is 1997 too, so we definitely took we bought standby flights to go to Germany on the airplanes that still allowed smoking. Oh, man, that was a new experience for me. I was like, what? They let people smoke on airplanes? That's fucking gross. And then it was like, oh, well, it's a German airline. It makes sense. They're always gonna be smoking. Then we get off the plane and everything is like, I think we flew into Dusseldorf or something, and then had to sit in the airport for 20 hours waiting for our driver guy to come pick us up.
That's the most European fucking tour experience ever. Like, dude, you get to Europe and you're like exhausted, and it's like, oh, now it's going to be 12 hours before this driver gets here because someone didn't tell him that we're going to be here now for some reason.
I know. And this is before anybody had cell phones, and there's none of that going on too. So we just showed up and hoped somebody picked us up, which eventually we did get picked up. And then I realized that they didn't refrigerate any of the vending machine drinks there, and everything was really hot and gross and smoky. Well, I was like, you know what? I am not impressed so far, Germany. Let's see what else you have to offer. But yeah, so we did go there for a bunch of misfits in a new country. We really let loose and did a whole bunch of stuff. It was fun.
Yeah, I feel like Gehenna's a band that the legend has, like, it was legendary at the time. Like the records were kind of coming out, and there was already sort of this mystique about this band and about how like wild it was. And I feel like it's interesting, like back then, because like it wasn't like Max Rock and Roll was covering this sort of stuff, like or you wouldn't read about this in like Heart Attack, but there was sort of this word of mouth myth building system that exists in hardcore where certain bands, be it Integrity or Gehenna or some of the New York bands, where like people would just like spread these legends, like in I guess like in medieval times, where bards would go from town to town and be like, "Let me sing you the tale from my town." Like people would show up at a different fest and be like, "Let me tell you about what Mike Cheese did at this Gehenna show."
Yeah, a lot of tales surround that dude for sure. Um, I'm glad that he keeps things interesting, you know. But Rhodes too, the bass player in the band, um, just as crazy. And I mean, and I say that with all the love in my heart for those guys. I fucking love those guys. I mean, they're my family. And even if we don't talk that often, you know, it's like they're the best. And they taught me a lot because I think I was maybe 19. That was my first tour ever. Was that European tour? So I was like, this is how tours go. Okay, I love it. You know, and not knowing that it would just be there. There are those times where it's just countless hours sitting in a van, but at the same time, you know, I guess I didn't really consider that that would be where a lot of the bonding between band members happens, is when you're stuck in a small space and there's nothing else to do, you know. And like I said, we didn't have phones or anything back then, so it was like I had a wallet full of CDs and like a Discman. We all had similar things. I remember Justin Holbo, one of the guitar players, brought a whole Marshall JCM 800 with him,
On the
and like,
plane.
yeah, and like took I remember he took the tubes out and like put them in this little Tupperware thing and put them in his backpack because he's like, I want to sound good, so I'm gonna bring my amp. And then, but there's like different power there,
Yeah.
so we had to like figure out this power thing, and I was like, yeah, well, everything is new to me, you know. I was like, these plugs don't work, and I can't like. Luckily, I didn't really have anything to charge, so it was fine. But you know, I couldn't. I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, we were in the van. A lot of discussions in the van. We'd stop a lot in the van. We did not get along with our driver. He was this Swiss fella who had a bunch of dick piercings and
Did he show
was
you that or
wearing.
just tell you?
He didn't be like, check out my schlong, but it was like, I don't. We'd stop to piss on the side of the road or something, and just his spray was just like going everywhere, and we're like, dude, what is wrong with you? You look like one of those fucking fun time sprinklers in the front yard. It's grandma's house or whatever. And he's like, oh, I have all these piercings in my dick, and I was like, dude, yuck. That's got to be such a pain in the ass.
I think you're probably waiting for that question if you have all those piercings, right? Because you're not showing them off too often. So,
Yeah,
oh, funny you should ask.
he was pretty open about it when we started asking. Uh, but yeah, we didn't get along in the end, and he ended up quitting. He quit with the van. He's like, I can't fucking handle you guys. You're crazy. All of you are crazy, and I can't be in this car with you anymore. So he just took the van and fucked off. And like, we missed a bunch of shows on the tour because we had to finish the thing riding on the train and like begging rides.
With a JCM 800?
Yeah, dude. Yes, carrying that and a duffel bag full of shirts and like, and fucking, I had to carry all my drum stuff, dude. That sucked. That stuff gets really heavy after like 3 blocks. Just walking, you're trudging through some stupid town in the middle of nowhere.
Loading
And
sucks, and that's like from the van to the venue.
dude, yeah. And all the while, Catharsis still had a van and a driver, and they would like show up to the shows and be all rested and like eating soy yogurts and shit at the venue, and we just like roll in just so haggard from being outside and trudging through the crap, and they're just like, what happened to you guys? And we're just like, motherfucker, we had to walk here from Germany or whatever. And they're like, oh man, bummer, you know. And I'm like, Yeah, kind of sucked. How was Italy? We missed it. And I remember being so fucking angry too, because I was like, this is the only chance I'm ever going to get to go see like the Sistine Chapel, or anything that's like a famous thing that you learned about in school. I was like, well, I guess I'm never going to get to see that. Thanks a lot, dickhead. And of course it was all this anger was pointed at this Swiss guy, not thinking like me and my fucking friends are insane, and we're causing trouble. I mean, whatever. We're having fun in
Yeah.
our way of having fun. And if you know Gehenna stories, you know that band has fun in a slightly different way than most other bands.
Very, for some people would say a terrifying way.
Yes.
Which
Terrifying to them maybe, but for us it was just a good old time.
for a country that's largely remained neutral, I think that would probably be a very terrifying experience to go from
True.
to the Gehenna van.
Couldn't take it, couldn't take it because, Swiss clock runs on time, and brother, we are not Swiss.
It's funny too, like with Catharsis, you think like reading Crime Think, they'd be like, oh yeah, throw your stuff in our van. We'll just carry your shit for you at least.
I don't know, like what the fuck they were thinking. Brian, I liked all the people in Catharsis too. Brian Dingledine is a very interesting fellow, in that, especially too, because he was like, I love Gehenna, like real serious, and after shows too, I love Gehenna so much. You guys are the best. I don't know if you've ever experienced him after his show.
Silent after I play.
This shit is hilarious.
Oh, it's incredible.
And we got like endless mileage out of that one for sure in our van. You guys need to go. Whatever. But Brian was like, he was supportive in the end of like, he's like, hey, I love your band. I want to put out your CD or whatever, and and so we'll collect the EPs and we'll have something to do this tour. And I'm sure that was all part of some grand scheme that Cheese and Rhodes cooked up. Like, we'll get this sucker to put out our CD, and then we'll have some bunch of free shit. we could go on this free trip to Europe. I don't know. I wasn't privy to the details of how all that shook out, but in my imagination, that's what it was. And Brian's no dummy. Like he knows that we weren't like taking advantage of him, but we did appreciate all of the cool stuff that he made happen for us as a band, which was great. But he also was just wrapped up in this weird fantasy world of like ideology and fucking communist politics, and he had this like zine that he was trying to carry around all over the place, this Harbinger thing that he was doing at the time, and he had his Crime Think thing that was like really starting to kick off at that time, and we were just like, wow, that seems like a lot of nonsense to us. But sure, we'll carry your fucking zines from the van to the venue for you, buddy.
Because it was Inside Front, then Harbinger, then Crime Think, right? Because I remember Inside Front was the zine where he really championed Gehenna. Like that was where I felt like that was like the one place that would write about Gehenna. Like obviously everyone else is like more independent zines, but it wasn't like Gehenna was being written about in Max Rock and Roll or like Punk Planet, I guess would have been later. But like but Inside Front, and it felt like the aura of Gehenna benefited Catharsis too. It made Catharsis seem like, oh, they might be crazy. And obviously it's nuts for a different reason, but
sure.
But like, and it's wild how popular Crime Think got, where I was talking to someone the other day and they were making reference to it. And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, Catharsis. And they had no idea about the origins, Catharsis, any of that sort of stuff. They just knew Crime Think as this sort of other political thing.
That's a funny one. They had kids eating out of garbage cans for years.
Yeah, we dumpster dive donuts.
Oh yeah. People they're gonna dumpster dive the Odwalla factory, get all those free juices and shit. Any bakery is just, ooh, man, that was rich find.
We dumpster dived a Blockbuster one time, and we scored huge in the DVD video game era. We got like so much stuff out of that dumpster.
Great.
Yeah,
thank you, Brian Dingledine, for showing us the way to all this free cast off stuff.
Yes. I still probably have some of those DVDs kicking around here somewhere.
Right on.
There was Area 51 put out um the Gehenna Catharsis. Oh, no, the Department 213 Gehenna split,
The
right?
split. Yeah.
There feels like there was a, you mentioned UNRWA earlier. There's a connection between Reno and the Arizona stuff in like
Oh yeah.
Phoenix, I guess, and
Yeah, for
Tucson
sure.
too.
Yeah, there was what was the other there was one of those other bands, not Landmine Marathon. What was the one before them?
Oh man.
I'm having trouble remembering names right now. Um, but yeah, Unra and Gehenna did a lot together. Unra Unra was another band that was like they were amazing. I mean, they were such a cool fucking band, and they were big in their in the Phoenix area, and I think a lot of it we all got along really well because we were all either interested in the same things, like we all skated and we all liked the same kind of like sort of hardcore that was kind of just dirty. It was real dirty and like criminal minded, uh heavy hardcore stuff, like basically like it's like the integrity side versus the I don't know, whatever the glossy fucking nonsense version of hardcore is.
And also noise rock informed. Like you brought up noise rock when you're talking about Gob,
Yeah.
but I felt like that's also something like it had like it wouldn't be out of sync with stuff on Noiseville, or it's obviously more hardcore than that, but like
Yeah.
had kind of like the sonic connection to that to me.
Yeah, the recording qualities are certainly very similar, where everything was like really heavy and really gritty and really just aggro, I guess would be a good way to put it. Which I connected to that immediately when I heard that stuff. I was like, dude, yes, this is for me. And seeing Unreal live, especially in the late '90s, was a fucking treat because they were just on fire. Like they sounded so good and they were so tight. And the drummer, Bill the Drill, he used to play blast beats like hard, and I was like, what is this? You can play blast beats like that? Yes. It was a real eye opener watching him play because he hit everything so fucking hard, but it was still accurate and powerful. It was great.
Yeah, I love that band. I remember being in Who's Emma and my friend handing me the LP being like, "Listen, man, if you like Gehenna, you're going to love this LP, man."
Hell
And
yeah.
and yeah, like I still listen to Unrise. I still like they're like well, like you're saying there's like and it's cool because every band was kind of connected that sounded like this, but there is sort of like a distinct subgenre that emerges sort of in the mid to late 90s in American hardcore that is like metallic informed dark hardcore where be it Integrity, be it Gehenna, be it Unra, there's like you said, criminally minded, noisy, like there's something an aesthetic continuity between all those bands.
Yeah, it's great. They were cool because they were into Deviated Instinct, which was not not a reference that I would have ever put together at the time. Certainly, 'cause I was like, "What's Deviated Instinct?" And they're like, "Dude, you haven't heard that yet? Okay, sit down, young man, and we'll help you to broaden your horizons." But like, do you think about a band that plays shows and plays shows with bands like Gehenna and Fall Silent and those kinds of things, and then they bring out something like Deviated Instinct, which is, if your listeners don't know, should look up. It's stenchcore is what they call that. Uh, Definitely not like a cool reference for that scene at all. Which is what I appreciated about a lot of the bands that we played with too, is that we were all into different shit. Like we listened to stuff, we listened to rap. Like we listened to Mob Deep and all those kinds of things, but at the same time, listening to Deviated Instinct, and like I think to make truly original music, you need a broad canvas of influences
Yeah,
to draw from. And I really appreciated that about them a lot.
yeah. Like the first time I met Mike from Gehenna, he was like, we were at a show. We're playing with that band Crystal Antlers. That was like an
Hmm.
indie band that was on Touch and Go. Great band, and the Damian from the band called me over and he's like, Damian, I want you to meet my friend. And there's a guy standing there in like an all black outfit with a black basketball jersey, black Jordans, black hat, and he's like, "This is my friend Mike Cheese." I'm like, "How the fuck do you guys know each other?" This is my first time ever meeting him, but like, yeah, there's just like this sort of, a vibe that it's like you can't really pin down exactly what it's like. Not like a youth crew band or not like a victory band. Like these bands were kind of like pulling from all sorts of disparate things, even like you're saying, rap music.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that's ultimately how I found my way to them too, because I came from listening to like, I just want to listen to Black Flag and Circle Jerks all the time and ride my skateboard and, steal as much stuff as I could steal and just trying to live, and they were like, yeah, you seem all right. You play drums and you like punk. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, listen to this, listen to this Integrity record and listen to this Deviant Instinct record and listen to this and to that. And they showed me a lot of cool shit because they were a couple years older than me too.
That was also oh, go on, sorry.
And I always appreciated that guidance and always looked up to them for that. And never understood why they were so maligned by so many people. People were just like, "Oh, Gehenna, fuck those guys," and then I was like, "Oh, well, they probably beat you up at a show because you were being a dummy, or you probably said something you shouldn't have said, and they called you on it, and that was that." So yeah, you probably hate them now, but that happened a lot.
Yeah, like it's a time where the scene was a lot more I guess like like self-policed, maybe in a bad way, or had to be
Yeah.
self-policed, I guess, because there wasn't necessarily a social media for a larger sort of like galvanization of people.
Yeah, I
So
wonder.
I don't know, but it's interesting to kind of look back on that band now because like I feel like them, Dystopia, Despise You, like there's bands that at the time like were maligned or maybe weren't as respected as some of the other bands during the era, but those are the bands that now people are really obsessed with. Like those are the bands that people are
Just
like,
revered like gods at this point.
yeah, and
Yeah.
which is awesome too because like you're saying, like these were the bands that were into stenchcore, like Mouse was on, and we're talking about like that's their vibe too, and they're coming from that scene that no one was into in Southern California
Yeah.
back then, where now it's like, oh yeah, there's like a whole generation of kids on TikTok that feel your vibe.
That's so weird, right? I remember when Damid, you remember Damid from Georgia?
Yeah, oh
They
absolutely.
they used to call dystopia tagger metal. And I always thought that was a really funny thing because I mean, especially at the time and still kind of to this day, like tagging and metal are not really synonymous in people's minds, but dystopia was like, yeah, we're that. We did and they nailed it. And
Well,
now there's imitators out there, but still nobody will ever sound like that band.
no, and that you've brought up the tagging thing, and that's the thing is like, be it going back to Spaz, like these dudes all wrote graffiti. Like it was like graffiti wasn't just something that showed up on a logo for a record. Like these were like tagger metal. This is a perfect name for this sort of subgenre because be it Despise You or Gehenna, like these people were all spraying graffiti around too. So it is people that would
Certainly.
write tags.
Yeah, certainly. Uh, I'd love to see Chris Dodge's graffiti.
I wonder. Well, he made Drew for Disney, right? So
Yeah. I mean, he was always more of like the cartoon side of things.
yeah, there's
Uh,
definitely
but I would just love the idea of him going out and like bombing.
bombing, getting on trains.
He's like, check it out. It's a cat.
Maybe
It's a
he's
cat's butt.
Banksy. Maybe he's like secretly
Maybe.
Banksy.
Could
That's
be.
that's
We'll have to ask him.
yeah. Uh, I gotta ask you about Artemis Pyle. And
Hmm.
were you on the Japanese tour?
I was on the second Japanese tour.
Is that
So
the
I've
one? Oh, sorry, go on.
I've had this track record of I forget what somebody referred to it as a certain thing. But anyway, bands will establish themselves, and then I play on like the second record, or like do the second tour, or because they'll for whatever reason their person that in the band failed to show up or imploded or died or whatever. But and then I'm stepping in. They're just like, well, he plays drums, and I don't know, whatever, he could do it. And so I ended up being able to do a lot of that stuff because I could play drums, and I'm very lucky that way. But in Artemis Pyle, that was certainly the case. They had done a tour in Japan with Crow and made a split 7-inch, all with this. It was the same lineup as like the very end of a band. They were all in a band called Fuckface before that, who I saw as a young person in Carson City. They came through with Hickey on that tour, and even Scotty, who was the drummer in Artemis Pyle, wasn't even in Fuckface yet. So my interaction with that group of people goes way, way back. And you know, we'd become friends with the people in the band over the years, you know, seeing them, whatever. We did Artemis Pyle show in Reno, and Scotty, they like methamphetamines, that whole band, like quite a bit. And Scotty was in deep with that stuff pretty heavily, to the point where I think that paranoia was kind of taking control of his life more than activities were.
Okay.
And so they had gone to Japan, done the tour, had a really good time with Crow. Crow asked Artemis Pyle to come back to Japan again. And Scotty just decided that he was going to stay in his room instead. So,
yeah.
And this was the first Artemis Pyle tour in Japan was that way, where they were just like, "Hey, can you learn our songs? Because we don't know if this guy's gonna like leave his room. We don't know if he has a passport. Like, we really want to do this tour, but like, we don't know if this is gonna work out." And so I was like, I think they had even bought me a ticket to go with them, and like I started practicing with them and stuff, and learning all of Scotty's parts, which are hard because he was a fucking weird drummer. I did my best, and he emerged at the last second. I was like, "All right, guys, let's go to Japan," and they're just like, "Son of a bitch!" And then they're like, "Hey, dude, we're really sorry. Like, you know, he's gonna do the thing," and I was like, "I get it, it's cool." But then they asked us to come back. And I was in the band at that point. So we went and did another tour with Crow. So it was 2 tours. It was Artemis Pyle and Crow together. And then when Artemis Pyle was over there, we actually recorded an EP at our house, which for me was a fucking dream come true. Cause it's
That's
like, dude,
insane.
we're going to record at this studio. And like Crow produced it. And it was such a cool experience, and they were really gracious. And that was my first time in Japan too.
What was our house like? Like, that's like the Dawn Furies of
Yeah.
Japan for me.
It was you know what it reminded me of, being in that room? It kind of reminded me of like a really small ballet dance studio. Like I swear to God, and my memory may be wrong on this. I swear to God, one entire wall was just mirrors.
Oh, whoa.
And we had all our, we had the drums, and everything was included. Like in Japan, all the clubs have a drum kit and guitar amps and bass amps and everything. And there's the same deal here. It was just like they had everything. We just rolled up and plugged our shit in, and the guy knew what everything was supposed to sound like already. And there was a language barrier, certainly, because I think that the engineer didn't speak much English, maybe very little. And of course, we didn't really speak any Japanese beyond like, thank you very much and where's the bathroom. And like, but once you're in the studio and there's an established language that happens there, where he's just like, okay, hit the kick drum and we'll do the thing and check all the sounds, and then he's like, all right, I'm just gonna hit record, bang, go for it. And so we went and recorded a bunch of songs that came out. Fuck, I don't even remember what release that came out as. I want to say it was on Mangrove. I don't know. Bad memory on that one. Sorry. It was a cool experience though. But being in there, but it was a really small room. As you can imagine, most Japanese spaces are quite small. But everything sounded really fucking cool.
It'd be cool to work with an engineer too, that like you could just reference any Japanese hardcore record. You wouldn't have to play it for them.
Dude, that is exactly what we did. We're just like, Gauze, and he's like, oh, okay, Gauze, yeah. Oh, you want to sound like Bastard, who recorded here? Okay, yeah. Sure, why not? I think I could do that.
Are you playing on that gear? Like, is it the same gear, do you know, or is it like?
I don't know if it's the same amps, or
okay.
I would assume that since the '90s, up until the early 2000s, I assume that some of it has changed, but I didn't ask. I was wrapped up in trying to play the songs right, and
Well, that was the
and
gimmick. That was the gimmick with Don Furies, is that you were playing on the same shells that they recorded "Victim in Pain" on with the drum kit.
cool, I guess.
Yeah, it's like the Stradivarius of drum sets.
I guess so. Yeah. Where are they now? You know?
Where are they? I wonder. He must still have his studio somewhere. I guess. I assume
Who knows?
he recorded the first Cat Power 7-inch.
That's funny.
I know. I just
With the
learned
same
that.
drums.
I wondered. That's what I thought. I'm
Oh.
like, they're playing on the Victim in Pain drums.
Whoa.
I guess now technically they're the Cat Power drums. Maybe more. No, they're still Victim in Pain drums. We can still keep.
Yeah,
that
come on now. You're getting ridiculous now.
I'm getting insane with this shit.
Yeah.
There's, speaking of legendary stories and infamous bands, and I don't know if it was on this tour or the first Artemis Pyle tour, that Artemis Pyle covered a Gauze song, and the next show the drummer from Gauze showed up and was very upset that they had covered that song. So
On the first tour?
I don't know. I don't know if it was the first or the second tour. I'd heard legend of this.
It certainly wasn't on the tour that I was on, because the drummer of Gizm was also in Crow. So he was on tour with us the whole time and was friendly enough. He wasn't. He was very much like, I'm in Gizm, but I'm also here, and like didn't really talk much. I think there also may have been a language barrier too, because I remember him and his girlfriend were like head to toe official Gizm gear, you know. And they're like, it was like very obvious, like this guy is in this thing, and like nobody fucked with him. And then he's like, at the end, he's just like, oh, I had a great time with the tour, and check out my other band. You know, it was a really strange. It was a really strange dynamic with him, with that band in general. Because I remember Crow was like afraid to ride in a car, and so he did the entire tour where he rode the train because the train had open space on it. And so he never was in the car with us. Like we all had a van, I think, and we all traveled together except for him. He went separately on the train by himself, and then would just show up to the shows. But then also Iron Fist and his girlfriend, whose name I can't remember, would be like in the very back of the van, like being very quiet and just like, I'm in fucking Gizm, all right? So
don't fuck with me.
Maybe think about what it is that you're going to say to me. And I'm like, dude, I realize that you're in Gizm, but do you use the same toilet paper that I use, bro? Because I'm pretty sure we're all going to take a shit at this rest stop. So let's hang out, man. And he was cool. He was a cool guy.
We've been to Japan 3 times, but just, playing a festival or playing this thing and that thing. So I've never gotten to experience playing like a Japanese hardcore show or like being involved in that. And Jonah's done it with Career Suicide, and I'm so fucking jealous of that shit. Like,
yeah, dude,
so
you should do it. You
jealous.
guys have done every other fucking thing. I don't know why you can't do that.
We never got invited. Japan's one of those places that you kind of have to get invited over. And we did
true.
a record on HG Fact, but it was at the very tail end of HG Fact.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that it was going to be weird, but when I met the dude, I gave him a hug and kissed him on the cheek. And
what?
Yeah. And people got...
He's not a toucher.
He's not a toucher. No, I didn't know that till afterwards.
That's funny.
So we did not get invited back for any sort of tour, any sort of show after that.
Well, I guess you could kiss that one goodbye, buddy.
I did, literally did.
Woo!
Worth it.
Cool.
Worth
He
it.
was an interesting guy. Sato, that was his name, right?
Sato, yeah. I hear he's not around anymore.
I haven't heard anything about him in a long time.
A crazy label. Like, you go through that record label.
Fucking great.
It's like Sub Pop, though, right? Like, they put out, like, stuff from every little subgenre of punk imaginable in Japan. And, like,
Totally.
that was my kind of, like, I guess, Western ignorance, was, like, thinking, like, oh, it's a monolith. Like, Gizom's like the Ramones or something. And, like,
yeah.
getting over there and realizing, like, oh, no, this is just, like, one little teeny subsect of this much larger thing that I didn't understand at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I know on that tour, I think we went to because he had a store. And so we went to the HG Facts store and met him there. And I was like really excited. So I was like, do you have any copies of that messed up 7-inch that you put out? And he's like, oh, okay, here you go. And I remember he was like, it's 800 yen. And I was like doing the math. And I don't remember what year this was, 2002 or something. And I was like, $8 for a 7-inch? That's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? It's cool. We're buying it at the source. I'm not going to be upset, you know?
Yeah.
But I got the record, you know, nice, clean stock copy of it from the man himself. I was pretty stoked. And still love that 7-inch, man, to
Oh
this
my
day.
God. There's so many like messed up paint box. Like you just go through zone. Like there's just like hitter after hitter. Most of those recorded at
Yeah.
our house too. So
Yeah, I know,
like
dude. I know.
I'm
Well, it was in our minds when we were there. We're just like, oh boy, the lineage of this room, pretty fucking nuts. And it was cool that we got to be a part of that.
and you guys are kind of going over too at the tail end of what to me is like the end of sort of like the perfect period of that style of hardcore. Like or
Mhm.
like the most vibrant moments of that style of hardcore, like leading into like those paint box LPs
Yeah.
and stuff, like where that like oh the bands like every night you'd be playing with like killer bands, like every opening band you'd be like holy shit this is fucking amazing.
Dude, the shows that we played on that tour were pretty mind blowing. Like we played a show in Tokyo at a place called Knock, which is like I guess a pretty famous venue. Um, we were certainly holding the place in reverence when we were there because you know had this like iconic checkerboard floor and like you've always seen these in like so many photos over the years too, especially like you know all these cool bands that played there and stuff. And so we were like, whoa, we're gonna play at this place, and we're playing with Age, uh, Crow, Shikabane, Gauze. This is like one show, and I couldn't. When I saw the flyer for that, I was like, this can't be real. This is like some fucking vision board shit that some kid came up with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this is not a real thing. And like, you know, Gauze. The best part is Gauze was like, oh, so we all showed up for sound check early, and Gauze is like, hey, if it's cool, you guys, can we play first? And the promoter is like, no, it's not okay.
No,
You're
please.
fucking Gauze. You're not going to play first. That's crazy. And they're just like, all right, it was worth a shot, you know? Because I think for them, they were just like, well, let's just get this done and get out of here, you know? But I didn't read it that way at all. I was just like, oh, they probably just want to play first because it's really fun to play first, especially on a stacked bill like that. Like, you don't have to worry about playing after some other band that maybe is really good or that you know is really good. Like Artemis Pyle did at that show. We headlined that show, which I mean is crazy.
But I hear that's what happens most of the time is that as the
Yeah.
touring band, as a sign of respect, you're going to headline, which is just
Yeah.
like, it's like, yeah, go on, follow that one.
Yeah. I mean, every single one of those bands was just perfect. They sounded perfect. They played amazing. Like every part of it was so fucking great. And I remember having we did like a little wrestling, me and the drummer of Gauze, whose name I can't remember. We were just having like a moment of bonding or whatever in the backstage where we were just like, oh, you play drums? I play drums. Cool. Let's hang out. And I remember he's kind of a tall guy, like real, like kind of Thai kickboxer style body, you know, like tall, sort of lean forward, lanky, but super fucking strong. And we had like not arm wrestling, but like, you know, we like kind of locked hands and we're just doing this like little wrestling thing. And I just remember his hands were like fucking vice grips and they were like big, you know, he had big like boxer hands, you know, and he's just like, and just crushed me. And I was like, dude, we're friends. This is an amazing experience. And then he was like, yeah, so you guys are going to play after us. And I was like, all right, we'll see how that goes. But I mean, I was so fucking excited by watching that show that like, it didn't matter when we played really. I was just so pumped. And then we killed it. we did really good. Cause I think all of us were really fired up.
Oh yeah.
And so we delivered and it was such a wonderful experience, but yeah, I never saw the guy again. Would love to shake his hand again at some point.
And get a rematch.
Totally, man. I'm way stronger now.
Yeah, I've been working out, lifting kids.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing how much Japanese hardcore and Japanese pro wrestling have like this sort of like interconnected relationship. Burning Spirits being like a quote from I think Antonio Inoki about Bruiser Brody,
Okay.
talking about having a burning spirit in his eyes,
Whoa, cool.
or there's like Kojima, who's like this very popular pro wrestler. His brother is the lead singer of Tetsuo Arai.
Mm.
And Jonah was saying when they were on tour with like Forward, those guys are just constantly talking about wrestling or doing pro wrestling moves to each other or actually
Awesome.
wrestling backstage. Like I find, because I love them both, but there is such like and there's also an intensity to Japanese pro wrestling that's kind of different than a lot of the American pro wrestling or Mexican pro wrestling. Like that does kind of have like a weird sort of, for me as like a foreigner, obviously not completely understanding it, but to Japanese hardcore, specifically Burning Spirit style hardcore. So it's, I don't know, I got to go back. I'm like, the only reason I'm still doing bands is one day someone hopefully is going to invite me back to Japan.
I'm sure it'll happen, dude.
One
I
day.
don't see why not. I'll put in the word when we go over there. We're going over there in July.
Oh, well, just put the word on the street. There's this bald bearded guy in Canada. He'll come over, do anything. He'll do anything just to get back.
Well, I mean, they might ask some weird stuff. You never know.
We went over and shot I went over with like a bunch of friends and we shot like a whole documentary TV show about pro wrestling in Japan for like we were there for a month, and it was one of the greatest months of my life. Like the only time I've never missed my kids when I've been on away somewhere. Like,
Wow.
I'm doing okay over here.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Like
Wow.
every day was just like, and I got to see Gauze because it was, I was over there for so long that I was lucky enough to see them play, and I got to see Deathside over there. Deathside, I don't know. I think I've seen them in America get more of a reaction than they got over in Tokyo, but I think people are a little burnt out on the experience.
I believe it. There's a nonchalantness that goes along with the crowd, but Japanese crowds are pretty fanatical about the things that they're into, which is amazing because it's that if they're there, they're there because they want to be there, whatever the event may be, whether it's wrestling or punk or fucking checkers, who knows? But they, I mean, it's bands like Deathside will play like on a Wednesday, There's like, just come over after work, I guess. Let's play a show. And people are like, oh, Wednesday? All right, let's try and show up for it. And it's just so casual for the shit here is like, they're legends here, Like Deathside will come over. And I think that Ishia knows. He knows. He's like, I was in Deathside. And when I go to America, people respect that. So, Forward toured here a lot. I think I did probably 3 or 4 separate shows for them, over the years. And they just keep coming back because everyone's just like, you're the guy from Deathside. And it's like, you're the bass player. You're the guy from Systematic Death. And you're the guy who played in Gizm now. And, it's like, there's all this like finger pointing of just like this previous achievements and they use that so that their band can go on tour. And that's fine for them. But I think Forward is fucking great. Forward plays all the time in Tokyo. They're just and shows that aren't even like, they're just like, yeah, we're a local band. We play a local show.
Yeah, like playing like third on at a fest.
Yeah.
In a day. Like I'm like, what the hell? And like this is wild to me.
I know, it's so weird, but also really fucking cool that they will do that. They're just like they are just regular ass people. And I think that's the way it should be.
Yeah, like it feels like the band thing is a lot less pomp and circumstance in people's like older hardcore people. Like I saw Real Reggae play when I was over there. I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea Real Reggae was still a band. That's fucking crazy.
They're so good.
So good.
Was a Human Tornado playing drums?
To be honest with you, I don't know the lineup, but the drummer was fucking unbelievable, so I would believe it. I can't believe that they're not
talking. We played with them last time we went over there.
That's amazing. Like
they fucking blew me away.
And they're still going, right? And like they're a band that I think it's only a matter of time before someone does like a TikTok discovery of this reggae hardcore fusion band.
Yeah.
But like you're saying, like these guys, it's not like these bands will just play on a weekend or they're just playing a festival. It's not like, hey, we're doing a reunion, come see us, like a merch drop. It's like, No, we're just in a band, and that's just what we do.
I love that. I love it. That's the way it should be, man. I mean, really, we're just doing thing, and I know that people need to capitalize, and they need to make it worth it because whatever their circumstances change in people's lives, and they need money if they're going to take time off work or whatever. But I always hope that uh, that people that were in bands for a long time, either if they still like playing together, they just shouldn't break up. You know, like me and John, we've been playing together for longer than I care to admit, and show no signs of wanting to like split anything. Like Iron Lung's ever going to break up, or if we do, it's because we're done. Like we're just like, oh, we wrote all the songs that we're going to write, so we're finished, and then we'll probably still do some other band together. But we haven't really ever wanted to do anything like that, and I do look to a lot of Japanese bands because that's kind of how they operate too, where they're just like, maybe we won't play a show for 2 years, but we didn't break up. Like we practice, we hang out, we're still a band. We just didn't do a show for you to come see us at. So just because we don't let you watch us play for a little while doesn't mean that we're not still operating at full capacity. Or like, they won't release a record for 8 years because they're just like, well, we didn't feel like it.
Yeah.
We didn't have the songs ready to go, or I don't know, we just write slow. Like there doesn't seem to be a lot of outside pressure on bands there to be constantly releasing something and constantly in the media and constantly gigging and like getting the word out. I guess, maybe that's the benefit of playing in such a small country. Geographically is a very small place to be. And so you probably don't have to get out there and play every fucking day so that people don't forget who you are. Like in America and in Canada too. I mean, there's a lot of fucking mileage going from west to east. And you got to do a lot of work to get people to pay attention. And because they're, like you mentioned TikTok, I mean, trying to compete with social media for people's attention is fucking hard.
Yeah. It's like when we put out a record that we spend years on sometimes, right? Like, when you're making a record, like, and it's in the back burner for years, and then we put the record out, and then I'll put out a video for the podcast that, took me 2 hours, but 2 hours to make, it's kind of worth the same thing to the internet. Like, there's no, and it's like, fuck. Like, it's hard to get those people to pay attention to, like, the actual thing that you're like, this took work.
Yeah, it's hard. And it is a lot of work. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think that a lot of people don't really pay attention to how much fucking work it takes to make a record, especially an album. Anybody can like fire off a song or two here and there. And that's possible and easy and quick. But even then, I mean, you still have to spend some time, writing and recording and making sure everything sounds right and making it look cool and all this stuff. And then, people just go, oh, cool, a new song. Listen to the first 20 seconds of it and then be like, next, or scroll or whatever the fuck, however it is that people are ingesting this stuff. And it's, so I got a lot of respect for people who stick with it for a long time and really put the work in and make something that's valuable, that's going to last. Because it's becoming a lot harder to do these days.
I think you bring up longevity, and if you look at like punk, the history of like bands, like be it the Melvins or Red Cross, like it's always like the duos.
Yeah.
Do you think there's like because you've been in all sorts of band configurations, but do you think there's something about the simplicity of the relationship of a duo that lends itself to longevity compared to like a band where there's like all these weird psycho relationships happening at once?
100%. Yes. I mean, there's writing teams, and then there's solo songwriters. But in my opinion, the duo, where you have one person or the other person and they both have ideas and it comes together and you talk about the ideas and you decide together this is a good idea. We can do this. And I think that there's that feedback part of having a partner for songwriting and music playing that is pretty crucial. But then when you expand it to more than one other person, that third heat comes in, and it's like shit gets weird. And when it's always at its core, if it's two people, then it's a beautiful fucking thing. Like there's a magic there, and I fully will stand by that statement that, you know, it's two heads are better than one a lot of times when it comes to writing songs. Yeah, and I know for myself, during the pandemic especially, I couldn't play music. Like there were a lot of people who were just like, oh, it's so nice to have all this free time. We get to do all this creative shit in the basement or whatever. And I looked at my drums every day and was just like, fuck that. I do not want to touch this shit at all. And I realized that if I'm not with another person, I don't have a lot of desire to just sit down and write music by myself. And especially if I'm not going to be able to play that music with another person and bounce those ideas off of somebody else. And it's not because I don't have confidence in the things that I can write, because I think that I can write a good riff and I can write a cool drum part on my own. I think there's no problem there. But being able to sort of formulate it with someone else makes it such a strong idea. Because if more than one person can agree that, yes, this is a good thing, then that speaks to it being viable as something to put out into the world for more than those two people to listen to. Because surely if these two people agree on this thing, that there must be something to it. And I think it goes wrong sometimes when it's a solo writer who's just like, my idea is the best idea. and sometimes it's not the best idea. But I don't know. I mean, that's my experience anyway.
The accountability that you get from having like a partner versus a solo thing, but then you don't have the second guessing that kind of comes in when there's, like you're saying, like a third cook in the kitchen, where there's someone else who's also like, yeah, but this and that. And it's interesting when you look at trios and like the way trios function. I'm always fascinated by different configurations of bands. And obviously I know that a 5-piece is very difficult to make work, and same with a 6-piece, but I think a duo, I'm once again living vicariously through you in that way too.
Yeah, it's pretty nice, I admit.
I got to ask you about a bunch of other bands. I could talk to you forever, and at some point, Jensen, will you come back for a part 2?
Oh, absolutely.
But maybe John, both of you guys should come back next time too. It'll be a fun conversation.
If you'll have us, we'll be there.
I'd love that. But before
We'd
you
like
go,
to be invited too.
Well, anytime. Before you get there, Cold Sweat. I think that band is super fucking underrated.
Really?
Oh, I love that Cold Sweat record.
It's the greatest band in the world. I don't know how you underrate that. No, just kidding. Actually, we have a new band, all of us, me and Sean and Nick, anyway.
Oh, that's awesome.
We were practicing last night.
Oh, that's wicked. I talked to Sean not too long ago, like over Instagram or something. So,
oh, cool.
Please tell him to say hello. That's fucking amazing.
Definitely. Yeah, he's great. But yeah, Cold Sweat that was a funny one too. Yet another band that I play in where they had a different drummer on the first record. And then I show up, I roll into town like guns blazing, like, eh. I remember, I moved to Seattle. This is 2003. I moved to Seattle, and I think maybe within 12 hours of living in town, I had fired off an email to the email address that was on Severed Ties. Just like, when's practice? I'm in your band. Like, I didn't ask. I was just like, to just tell me when to show up. I'm in your band. I'll play guitar, And graciously, Nick wrote back and was like, hey, actually, I play guitar and we don't need another guitar player. So it's like, all right, set a firm boundary. Very cool. And then in the same email, he's like, however, our drummer is considering moving on to other things. We know that you play drums. Would you like to play drums in our band? So, I mean, it was literally that easy to just be like, I'm in your band now. And they're like, we agree. Come on down. And so, I think I met up with them within a week of moving to town. I met up with them, and the match of personalities and interests and everything was like a glove. I mean, it was amazing. Because it was like the same thing. I was like all straight edge guys in the band who don't give a fuck about straight edge, really. You know, like they're just like, yeah, we're straight edge. But we don't really advertise. Like we don't X up at shows and we don't do this. We're just this way because we're this way. And they like liked all the same kind of shit that I liked musically. Also, super diverse tastes. Um, and I love the songs. And I was like, this record, because at the time, like in 2003, there were like no bands playing music that sounded like that. Like it was urgent and it was like flag influenced and but fucking dark and angry and like introspective, but also sort of like there was a mystique to the band too because nobody really knew who they were. They toured a tiny bit. Like they did a really ill-fated West Coast tour where the van broke down and I had met them all in Reno actually because I had just gotten an ACL reconstruction on my knee, skateboarding accident. And Sean and I bonded over that because he had had a similar surgery like right before that. And so I was in my bedroom because they played in my basement in Reno. So I was in my bedroom the only time in my life where I was ever on any kind of painkillers because the doctor was like, this is going to hurt real fucking bad. We're going to take your whole knee apart and put it back together and, do all this shit. It's going to suck. You should probably take these painkillers. And I was like, all right, fine. I guess I'll fucking try it out. I don't know what this is, but whatever. So I was a little dazed listening to Cold Sweat play in my basement, and I couldn't go downstairs to watch them because I had had surgery the day before they got there. And I was listening to it and I was just like, this is amazing. And I don't know if like listening to music on drugs is why people do drugs and listen to music.
I got to be honest with you, it is. It's definitely
because
part
I
of the
heard
appeal.
it and I was just like, holy shit, this is incredible. And I'm listening to it through a heat vent. And it's like they're just destroying down there. And they came up and stayed at the house, and we had great conversation. And so yeah, when I moved up to Seattle, I was just like, hey, I'm in the band. Let's do this. And I mean, I didn't talk to them at all from that show until I moved to town. I just knew that it was a thing that existed and that I loved it. And no one else was sounding like that. I think that, Limp Wrist, I think was kind of going at the time and playing cool, fast hardcore. But there wasn't anything with the same kind of attitude that Cold Sweat had. It had its own thing completely. And I really, really fucking liked it. It was loose and crazy but powerful and sinister. I mean, it was incredible music. And then when I jumped in, they had a couple songs written already, and then I ended up getting to write most of Blinded with them. And it's different sounding than the first record, certainly, because my style and Burke's style is different. But
I love Blinded. I think that era is like a real interesting era because there's like it's almost like the thrash era goes into sort of like the 81 recreationist kind of era, and then you have almost sort of this like I guess proto Mysterious Sky hardcore period where you have Cold Sweat, Mind Eraser, Iron Age. Sexted would be a little bit later, I guess, but like there's sort of like this sort of period of bands that were like hardcore, but hardcore was going to get interesting again because no one was like trying to be something. It was just like, yeah, we like all this shit and we want to bring all of it into this thing and make something that doesn't sound exactly like the thing that we like, which was the style before that. Certainly I was in a couple bands that tried to sound exactly like some other band before.
I mean, it's a fun thing to do. It's like we want to, and it's easy to pigeonhole your sound into something like we want to sound like the second song on Victim in Pain or, I mean, I've heard people say shit like that where they're like, we base the entire sound of our band on this one part of one song on one record. And it's like, that's too much. That's too much tunnel vision. You can't do that. Like you limit yourself so much that you can't be creative anymore. And that was one of the things that I appreciated about that whole scene of bands that you're just talking about is Cold Sweat was like, no, I mean, we're gonna have a Sabbath thing, and that's okay to have that, but we're also gonna have this flag thing, but we're also gonna have this gauze thing maybe, and then mix it all together and make something new. And I mean, that's the kind of songwriting that keeps things fresh. And they obviously did that and continue to do that. You know, Nick still is like one of the most unique guitar players that I've ever seen play guitar.
Yeah.
And he's like he can't play a death metal solo to save his life, you know. Timing is sometimes a kind of a foreign idea to him, but
That's
but
me too.
goddamn
So
if he doesn't fucking write a good riff.
yeah, I write some
I mean,
killer riffs. Walls is fucking
yeah.
unbelievable too.
Yeah, thanks.
Um, and then Innumerable Forms, which I feel like that record is a monster, and that was like something DFJ I know was working on for a long time.
Oh yeah. Well, that was a solo band for him. Thank God I don't have to play drums in that band. Holy shit.
You played live though, right? Or
Not drums. I play guitar
oh, guitar?
in that
Yeah,
one.
he
Yeah.
yeah, because like who did he play drums on the recording, or did someone else play
On
drums?
the all the first releases, the
Okay.
first the 7-inch and the split LP, that's all Justin's playing everything. All the guitars, drums, vocals, the whole deal.
This is Foo Fighters.
Exactly. But it didn't expand into a full lineup until the albums.
Okay.
And it's been the same lineup on the first two albums. We actually have a new album that I think is coming out in August
Oh, awesome.
that we worked on, but it doesn't. Doug left the band, unfortunately. So we have a Dale Nixon bass player situation on that one, which is it's fine. I mean, it sounds great. And you know, we're still trucking along. But yeah, that was another band. It's the joke, the running joke with that band is a good one, and is that everybody in that band plays drums in other bands. So we're all drummers. And so that it lends itself to our band being pretty tight
Yeah.
because we know how it's supposed to work. And Justin, you know, he's kind of like the ringleader of the show, where he's just like, he's calling the shots, like this part's gonna go here, and this thing should sound like this specific reference to something that I've probably never heard of. And he has like such a specific vision of what he wants that band to sound like. And it's kind of awesome. And that going back to your multi-person band dynamic thing, having him sort of be in that leadership role and calling out like, hey, it would be cool if we did like a Paradise Lost thing here, and then did like did a demigod thing here, and then we could kind of put it together and mix it up or whatever. And he's open to suggestions. Me and Chris Ulsh write a lot of riffs for the band and send them to Justin, and then Justin is kind of like, yes, 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 no, not this one, change it and it'll be good. You know, he's like that guy. And so it's kind of a cool dynamic to have someone that's sort of like a filter for all of the things that should be, because he's got the vision for the band, because he started it. It was his thing to start with. And so we respect it in that way, and that where we can come in as people who joined later to be like, he's set like some parameters for how the thing should work. And then we just occupy that space in the band and offer our own ideas too, which he's open to. And it has changed certainly since the beginning, but the vision for the band has always remained very, very focused. And it's great.
Yeah, I think he was talking about it like a good 2 years before he even started. I remember him talking about it for years before he even started recording with it. Or like he was probably demoing and doing stuff with it, but like it feels like for someone that's been in so many bands, like this is the one where it's like the focus. Like,
it's all him.
It's all him.
I mean, you know, it's yeah, he was championing Finnish death metal way before anybody ever gave a shit about anything even remotely related to that stuff.
Yeah.
And Death Doom was like, who the fuck cares about Death Doom in 2007 or whatever? But Justin, he was just like, I do. You know, we're gonna sound like Demolic or whatever, and people are like, what?
Well, I think
he's like, you'll see.
Well, I think that's why the bands of that era sound so cool, and it's because like it was like kind of the perfect storm of still having the desire for information, but then all of a sudden having all that information at our fingertips, like right where we
Yeah.
could all like you could order the record from anywhere. You could even maybe hear it somehow. Like it's pre-YouTube where everything's available, so you're not overwhelmed by the amount of choice that's out there.
Yeah.
But like you could dig so deep on shit, like just go so into like these little micro subgenres that we're touching on a bunch of here, but that no one would have had access to in other times. Or like if you did, it would have been like finding the odd record or dribs and drabs unless you were local to it.
Yeah. I know for me, growing up, I was super into death metal and like thrash and stuff when it was coming out in the late 80s and early 90s. Like, I'd always listened to punk, certainly. But then when that stuff started to kick off, like early Sepultura, and you get like the RC records and Roadrunner and Earache and all that stuff was like just kind of starting to unfold. Um, that stuff just fucking blew my mind. You know, I'd go to the record store and there was a guy at the record store in Carson City who was in a band called Mr. Buzzsaw and the Blasphemy Boys.
What a
Uh,
name!
oh, they were a treat. Killer drummer. Anyway, um, he was really cool. He was like obviously he was a metal guy, and so I would roll up with my Exploited tape or whatever, and I was like, "What do you think about the Exploited?" And he's just like, "Yeah, they're cool." And I'm like, "What's Sepultura?" And he's just like, "I think you would like them. You should probably get that." You know. So I'd bring it home and just be like, "What?" And it was like a whole new world opened up, and this was like 1990, like right when that shit was all coming out. Like Altars of Madness was like fresh, and first Deicide record was the new thing. All these things that were happening at the time, and so I was really lucky to sort of glom onto a lot of that and have somebody with a little bit of guidance just be like, "Hey, I think you should check this out." What a cool fucking thing,
Yeah.
that go into the record store without having all the noise of modern influence and modern fucking streaming and all the shit that where you can download everything in seconds. Like you got to go to a place and talk to a guy who knows about stuff, who has maybe listened to that stuff ahead of time and can recommend something to you. I think that is becoming a lost art. Um, and so I do think that, and Justin is like this too. Justin is kind of like the perfect filter for all of this stuff that he's influenced by, because he can kind of guide us. Like we'll be, me and Chris will be riffing on something, or me and Justin will riff on something. I'll be like, I got this idea. We should do something like this. And he'll be like, oh, that reminds me of these like 5 things that he's already internalized and completely filtered all the nonsense out of, and being like, this is a good riff, or this is a good way to go. And I think that that's one of his real strengths as a human being. And I think that's a really valuable resource, is to have somebody who kind of knows what they want out of things to sort of steer the ship. Pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's well, like you're saying, it's a vision that's being
Yeah.
adhered to and followed, and that's going to make it turn a certain way. But like what you're saying about the record store clerk and the people in the record store recommending you that stuff, like you look at the way it shaped the history of punk, right? Like people getting into certain records in certain cities informed the sound of the bands that came out of that cities afterwards, and so it added to the sort of the uniqueness based on like who the record store people were, or what record store it was and what records they were getting in, because
Yeah.
not everything was available. Like sometimes you get
No.
MCR, sometimes you get Canadian Gob.
That's fucking true. They were the first tastemakers.
Yes, exactly. Well, anytime, Jensen, you want to come back on this show, you are always welcome.
Thanks. How about tomorrow? Just kidding.